Hi, I'm Rachel Hunter and welcome to Human Spirit. Next, we get to meet Tāme Iti. I literally become speechless because I had always wanted to interview him from seeing him basically probably in the late 80s. He is an activist here in New Zealand who really was critical at shaping New Zealand's history and continues to be such a powerful voice in this space. He truly is one of those people that creates an action to make you kind of pay attention. And to me, that's the activist is bringing you attention. I hope you enjoy the interview. I remember seeing you on TV when I was very, very young. And then later on, I was always had that, who are you?
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know what it is. It was some kind of intrigue and wonder and the passion, basically, I remember.
Yeah.
And then later on too, it was like, I would really love to meet you. And then finally, I mean, what am I now, 55?
Yes.
So here we are. And I feel, I don't know what this interview is going to be like. And I don't know, I don't have any ulterior motives other than I just am really excited to be here with you.
Yeah.
Where all of this started for you, where, you know, and I did see as far as you were speaking Māori.
Yeah.
And, you know, you had this option because you weren't meant to speak Māori back then. So you had this option of either writing out,
Yes.
I can't speak Māori, or you had to go and,
Yeah.
all of that. And I want you to tell your story.
Yeah. I think that interesting because I wasn't raised by my parents. I'm a whāngai, which was raised. I'm also raised from the same people who raised my father, and he was born 24. I was born 52, and interesting. I'm not too sure what my life is if I was brought up by my parents, you know, and brought up in the city in Hamilton. He was a railway worker, and I give thanks to those old people that raised me. Interesting period of time, I guess, for us, and they were. Well, you know, they went through life themselves. You know, they had something like 12 or 13 children, kids themselves, but they also raised something like altogether about 25 kids.
Wow.
You know, not
it's
only
an incredibly intense sense of
so
community.
Imagine, bringing their own children, and then my generation. So. I'm the tuakana, I mean the oldest of those, the last lot that were raised by them. Yeah, and really interesting because I had to think about these things for the first 15 years of my life. You know, and you go through. I mean, it's a small village. I still live in their village, and I still live in the village they've been living from 100,000 years ago. And not an easy place to live at times. You know, sometimes it's good to be in the city and nobody knows you.
Yeah.
You know, you live in the city.
You just dissolve into
you
things.
You lock yourself up in your little box and that's it. And but I live in the village. Everybody related. Everybody knows you. Everybody knows everything about you. You know, and that was good too. I mean, there's really good parts of it, you know. And but you know, we've been brought up in the colonial system. You know, you go through. You know, so everything was about God, king, and country. You know, so imagine yourself being raised in that, and we had second thoughts. So everything was geared up how to be a Pākehā, you know, and how to be, you know, honour there, not only one language. And the language that I know, my first language, I didn't learn that from school. The language, all our language, we learned that from home. We learn that, whether it's your English or Chinese. We
Yeah.
all learn that from mum and dad.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so that's where my first language came from. And and a really interesting period of time, because we live in a place there, it has no power, you have no water system, you learn, you don't have a bathroom, so you wash down in the creek, in the creek. We had a little creek, nice and clean creek, and it became a way of life.
Yeah.
You don't really think much about it.
So it's almost like that merging. You're the ways of nature. You worked with.
Oh yeah, and we don't live in. You're not allowed to be in the house. You live outside. Yeah, you spend most of your life out there underneath the trees with the birds, the dogs, animals all around. So we're the first lot of farmers. Our family, Ruatoki was introduced to, by a guy called Apirana Nata. And Apirana Nata, those are main characters back in those days. Apirana Nata, Sir Peter Buck, two other characters. And but he was the main one for us in our community. And so we happened to be one of the first lot of farmers back in just after the First World War. And so they reckon that it'd be good for the Māori community to be farmers and feed animals and all of that. So I was brought up in that. So very much, we had plenty to eat. Plenty of food, and so we had to look after all the ducks and chicken, pigs, cows, dogs, all of that. So they become your friends.
Yeah.
So you have a relationship with animals.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I still do.
Yeah.
And they're interesting characters. It's just so that part of it, and going to school was a whole different experience too, and for kids like me, brought up on the farm, well, I'm tired by the time I get to school, because you got to get up early hours. So by the time you learn to walk, you got to work. If you don't work, you don't eat. And so by the time my brain wasn't really. I can hear things, I can see things, I can read things, So they teach you all about, hey, diddle, the cat and the fiddle, the cow jump over the moon, all of that. And
but I guess when you're working with nature like that and the wisdom that holds, and then you see.
What I have learned is I can take you and find food.
Yeah.
I can still do that.
Yeah.
You don't have to go to your fridge and go to your freezer to go and feed, and that's sort of kind of part of when I was on the Treasure Island, and trying to share some of those experiences. And taught me to, away from how to deal with time, because I wasn't trained how to live in the city. That was a whole nother experience. So shifting from the village for the first 16 years of my life, and then I'm out of the village.
Yeah.
I want to get out of the village. I didn't want to remain there.
No.
Because I didn't want to get up 5 o'clock in the morning. It had to be something much better than I don't think I want to be a farmer. Yeah, I still love the animals.
Before you left the village, did you have that experience of having to have that choice when you were speaking Māori? Is that what sparked that? Like, I'm not or not?
Yeah, very clear. Very clear. I think around about 8 or 10, maybe 10-year-old. When the school made a rule that from now on, here against that, I will not allow Maori to be spoken at a school. And we all kind of, see what's going to happen. We kind of check it out, see what's going to happen.
Do you recall how you felt inside when you heard that?
Oh, yeah.
Did it?
We all kind of talked to each other. We all looked at each other like this.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not cool. What the hell he's on about, you know? And, yeah, and we were keen to kind of check it out to see what's going to happen. And those of you who remain to speak Maori on my school ground will be here after 3, which is school finish. So we just carry on and do that. And then I think there would have been 3 or about 4 of us. So we had to go in and we found out you have a choice of writing 100 lines, I will not speak Māori, or go with a wheelbarrow for an hour, pick it up, because he owns the animals around the school. So we had to go and collect all the animal shit. Yeah, and so we go around. So I think I went through about 3 times. I did I went up with the wheelbarrow. I think I done about 400 or 500 lines, and then after that you go, I don't think I can do that. Yeah, you kind of stop. You know, you kind of stop, and so no, I don't want to do a lot more 100 lines on this. You know? I did have to talk to the old man, and I said, I was talking to him in the reo, and I said, well, there was a new rule at school. I was here with him, and we're not allowed to call little Māori at school, and then what he said was, well, koia te rangatira, he's the boss. Yeah, and that's not what I wanted to hear. No. So you kind of sit there and that's not what I want to hear.
No.
Yeah, so you kind of hold on to that.
Yes.
And you don't say anything.
No.
You know, so you kind of, okay, I'm not going to ask him that again.
No.
For whatever reason he decided. And, and they kind of remain in my head for a long time. When I left home going down to Christchurch, then I hear people talking about they don't have the reo. They don't speak, you know, because it happened to their parents and it happens to them.
They can't.
So they encourage the children not to speak Māori at all. Yeah. And so, not for me. That's my first language. That's all I know.
Yeah.
English, my second language. I still trying to get my tongue around the English language. You know, I can read, but you know, when you speak in another language, it's a whole different exercise. Yeah. As you know, and so that was for me. So going through those experiences and trying to share. So out of all of that, many years later, become part of my artwork.
Yeah.
And creating their work.
Because it's almost like you had this evolution of activism, almost. Like it first sparked within you somewhere. There was this will. And even though there was so much passion.
Yes.
And there was so much vitality and presence.
Yeah, well, I didn't get that till I was around about 18 or 19.
And you really...
Yeah, you know, because I didn't have a voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I kind of kept it because that's how we've been brought up.
And once it was almost school was done, then you were allowed to accelerate.
And then I discovered my voice. And... you know, it was pretty hard. I started to sweat. I started to, you know, I had to try and think, you know, I had to try and work it out what I have to say, you know, and but I managed to go through that. In fact, I took myself to I remember reading a little note at the hostel I was staying in Christchurch. And there was a note there from a lady advertising that for those who want to learn the English language, and it's only about 20 cents an hour, and I said, I like that. Yeah, so I run her, unbeknown to me, there were 3 other fellas from the hostel.
Who were also going
to? So I went there.
So basically you went down to Christchurch to do an education, I think, in interior design,
I did
right?
Interior decorator. I'm a painter, interior decorator by trade.
Yeah.
So
I love that you did interior decorating.
Yeah.
Like you're vast. It's almost like you're lived thousands of lives in one lifetime, going in and wanting to understand the interior design as well as the art. And you didn't care. You were like, this is what I'm doing?
Yeah, well, I didn't know anything about interior decorating.
No, you mean you were...
I have no idea, anything. I put in, you give them 3 or 4 options when you're at school.
Yeah.
And they had these guys from the Second World War. They were given a job by the Māori battalion. So they come and talk to kids like us. And so I think I put in for forestry, panel beating, and something else. But I end up in interior decorating.
Wow.
Yeah, I have no idea what it is. But anything but milking cows. Yeah. But I tell you thing, because it opened another part of my thinking.
Right.
It opened another, I couldn't go to sleep.
Right.
I started to get, never in my life, for all the first 16 years of my life, I started to get really hungry to learn.
Wow.
To learn new things. I couldn't go to sleep. I couldn't wait to, so really interesting going, because all of the teachers that come from, they were at the Technical Institute of Christchurch. They all come from, Dutch, from
all parts of the world.
All part of the world. Interesting history. Wow. Yeah, so I learned all about interior decorating in the products they made, the paint that they make, and all of that. Yeah, open another aspect of my whole life.
Because a lot of how I saw you on TV, there was activism, there was, coming out to want justice.
Yeah.
And then ironically from 18 and then to what in the last 20 so years you have gone back to the art too.
Yeah. Well, I didn't do the art I always love art.
So you've always done it all the way through.
Always love art as a kid, So we did a lot of drawing pictures of these, had a lot of comics. That's how we learned the English language. Because we used to buy all the Phantom.
Comics. Yeah, that is so good.
Yeah, we used to buy all the comics. And we click comics.
Yeah. In TED Talks, you actually speak to, obviously, the mana there, but also the Māori language, being that you are speaking from the flowers, from the earth, from the sky, from the water. So there is more of that deep connection with the elements of New Zealand and the way New Zealand is, which literally I was in tears when you said that, because that's what's so beautiful is within your language and any other indigenous language in the world, there is this connection, and it's beautifully spoken simply, and so why I'm laughing is because, you learn English through the comic books.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
But can you talk to that? Because I think, when you said that, it resonated so much to what we strive for, as far as we're made up of these elements. And when we come from the ground, the earth, the sky, wherever it is, when you speak to that, and when Māoris speak, there's so much depth and so much force when you speak.
Yeah, well, we're making those, those relationships, those connections with rangi the sky, Papatūānuku the mother, to the, to the forest, to the animals, and, all making those connections. But as you go, you have a bit more understanding more about it.
Yeah.
You're brought up in it. Now I got it.
Yeah.
And now I got it. It makes sense.
Yeah.
And
but there's almost a magic in the way of speaking it.
Yeah. And I think that, and that's why I totally believe that we need to go back to the beginning.
Yeah.
To the ancient times.
Which is what's happening everywhere in the world right now.
There's no shortcut to life. So you must go back to that, then and take take another journey. And then you go through that pathway, you know, and to see things, to smell, to touch, you know, and, you know, the energy, you know, and having those, all of those different elements, you know, and, you know, I had to get, you know, for a lot of us that have been colonised, it takes us a while to unravel all the first 16 years of your life, you know, about Christianity, the dogmatic way that they teach you, you know, all of that, you know, because I'm still thinking about it even in those days, you know, because they were pretty hardcore about that, you know, so we had to follow two religions. There's a Ringatuism and there's a Presbyterian Church. The Presbyterian Church came about there during the the arrival of the old guy John Lawton that went out to meet up with Ruakena, the prophet over in Mongopohatu, and he said to Ruakena, don't worry about the kids. I look after the kids, and you deal with the adults. Well, what it means, he's going to teach them the new way. Yeah. So you get mixed up in that, in that whole kind of thinking about, you know, about the whole Christian thinking. Yeah.
I mean, the deep connection with the elements. That's what I was just this weekend. I have a house up in Pakari.
Oh yeah.
And you just lay on that ground and you just listen to the tui, you listen to the animals. You can only feel that held, and it's going back to that, like you were saying before.
Yeah, well, that's the language.
Yeah.
That's the ancient language, you know, and the ancient language come from the tui, you know, all the different sounds they're talking.
Yeah.
Because they're talking to you.
Yeah.
You know, and then you hear the ancient voice. And then it's so nice, but there's a moments of silence you don't necessarily hear that in different places. You probably hear more so in my village, you don't hear that. Not as much as I did there 40, 50 years ago. There's too many cats around the place, you know, and all of that. You know, the cats go down and knock them out. So, you know, how you deal with that, you know, how do you bring that other part of our nature?
So I just want to make people aware that there is different iwi in New Zealand, and you come from Tuhoi.
Yeah, well, I come from Tuhoi.
Yeah.
That's on my father's side.
And your mother's side?
Yeah, on my mother's side, I come from Waikato. Yeah, from here, from Waikato. And then also on my mother's side, I come from Rotorua, from Te Arawa.
Okay.
So I'm kind of connected to different places. And
Can you
that's a journey on itself too.
Yeah.
You know, discovering myself, being brought up by the old people. They don't talk about my Waikato side or my mother's side. Funny, because when you're brought up in that kind of mentality, and my radicalism, that doesn't come from Tuhoi, they reckon. That's my Waikato side. Yeah, we have a bit of a laugh about it, you know, all of that. But and so that's another journey itself to rediscover those other connections.
Because Tuhoi is, I mean, from what I know, is the children of the mist, correct? It's one of its meanings.
Yeah, the misty people.
Yeah. Can you speak to that?
The Uruwera, as we all know, is twice the size of Auckland area, 5 times bigger than New York. You know, so... Yeah, you know.
Where did they get that name from, though? The children of the mist, Tuhoi.
Oh, yeah, misty, you know, it's always stories around that, you know, around the children of the mist. And they always say that you always know there's somebody new in the village, you know, and then...
Does it have a very spiritual aspect, more spirit-related?
I call her my girlfriend, my girlfriend hanging around.
You do?
Yeah. Wherever I go around overseas, and I say, oh, my girlfriend hanging around. Brought the mist.
Brought the mist.
Yeah, the misty people. so always sort of kind of, because of the water, the elements of the bush and all of that, so it builds up, come from the ground.
Mist.
Very misty. And, so there we become the children of the mist, of the misty people. And so we kind of renowned to be mysterious. We don't totally give you everything.
Can you just briefly touch on the so-called the radical side of that, all the way from the activist side, I guess, throughout that time before you came to the art, like back in the 70s, all the way through that?
Well, apart from those that experience with writing 100 lines, well, I actually met a lot of the early radicals from the First World War. And people like...
Why do we call them radicals when really
well,
they're
they
just
come
wanting
from the media,
justice, right?
from the media. There's a social consciousness people.
I mean, you don't agree with, like, it's someone's point of view, basically. They're wanting the justice,
that's where
right?
they came from.
It's not.
They came from the media. Their radicalism come here. But we are people that have a view. That's all. But they give a name to it. They come up with all these different labels, which I've been branded with all of that, and had to live with that. And I think I'm starting to become a nice fella. I no longer become the big threat, and but really, really strange.
Do you look back on any of that and go, that I could have, or no, this is me, this is how I am?
I met people like characters like James Gay Baxter. He was a really interesting guy. And he was the guy that used to go and occupy empty Wellington City Council homes. And there's a lot of, and back in the days, the people living on the street were many old Pākehā males. And you hardly see many Māoris there on the street. And I was really interested to see how he does it. Yeah. So I hang out with him probably 1971 or 72. Yeah, I just want to have a feel. But prior to that, I also met a lot of the old fellas from the First World War, or the old activists, the Quakers, the communists, from that period of time. And really interested because I always used to think that my enemy is blonde hair, blue eyes, and then I got to the point, that's not true. That's not true. It's just the way you kind of brought up in that space of time. And then, no, the enemy is within. You had to deal with the enemy within myself, and I had to deal with that. And so I shifted from that. And so meeting a lot of the old activists from the First World War right through that period of time. They were old people then, but very smart. They were really big help for many of us of their generation, my generation. I mean, the 70s was amazing period of time. We would have loved it, It was a really amazing time.
Everybody was allowed to say how they felt, where they wanted. It was just. I mean, look, I was born in '69, so I really dipped out on that one. But it was just that freedom to be able to. Speak.
It's really, So you got a Jimi Hendrix music, you got the flower music, you got all the different elements of that. It was really exciting. It was fun.
Yeah.
It was really fun, because by the time I finished my apprenticeship, around about 68, 69, 70, about 70, 71.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was free to...
I'd love to know what your art was like back then. That must have been amazing.
I want to do something else different.
Yeah.
But I always had, for my first 4 years of learning, to be a... doing that kind of work.
Wow. So then what did you move into after that?
I spent most of my time on the road, coming creative ideas. And I did guerrilla theatre. I did a lot of stuff, campaign for the Springbok tour, the anti-Vietnam War during the whole period of time. I had time in my hands.
And you also worked with alcoholism? Right?
That was later on.
Later on.
Later on, that's later on because I couldn't get a job. Nobody would hire me.
Because of what?
Yeah. But I also joined up with the New Zealand Communist Party, which I like the idea, the concept of the idea. I like the way that I have a better understanding about the capitalist system, and everything all about making a profit, exploitation. That's really shifted my whole thinking. It's not the blue eyes and the blonde hair. Bigger than that. Yeah. So, so I got a better view, a concept about where I'm going to, where I'm heading to. The different stages of your life. Yeah, and so I got involved with many other young Māori and women of that time of the 70s. And so we just become to talk about the language.
Yeah.
And then we start talking about the whenua, the land, making those connections. And what happened 100 years ago, how we're going to deal with it, and how we're going to confront the system. Yeah, because a lot of our parents from our parents' generation, they all don't want to say anything.
I know,
Fear.
because you're scared.
If
you say anything
fear.
wrong, if you say anything right, especially now too, because you can also, if I don't say anything, if I don't do anything, but then if I say something, it can also be seen as that. So you're damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part. Like, what would you suggest to people who, who do have a passion about something? Doesn't have to be political or anything, but about something. How do you execute without?
All of us have passions.
Yeah.
All of us human beings have certain passions.
Yeah, we do.
And whether it be eating food, whether it be swimming, surfing, whatever that is, and we all have that. And I have many passions. And I think I had to let go of some.
Right.
I think I get many satisfied. And so I had to change my eating habits. Certain food I used to like, so I had to shift my eating. I'm no longer eating those particular food.
Yeah.
Yeah. And trying to get myself back to what's good for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for more so at my age, thinking more about what is manageable for me that I can wear. Cycling still a good thing for me. I can still do 100k race. I never win a race, but I can make 100k's. So you what part do you let go?
Yes.
And so art is a really good place, a good space for me.
So is that your place where you actually, when you're expressing yourself with however you're feeling so much, is that where that is now rather than being saying?
I think it worked for me, and I think it's having a different voice in a different place, and so I really believe that that we need to find a place for all of us. It's not just about tūhoi, not just about Waikato, but Aotearoa. For you, the blue eyes, the green eyes, the brown eyes, and so we just need to let go of our hang-ups, whatever that is, and then we just find a place that we can trust each other. Yeah. That can work for us. Yeah. And why trying to create something that is not good for the soul? Yeah. And when you talk about human spirit, our wairua, and that's really important that having a better relationship with yourself.
Maybe for some of those people who don't really know the history of how Māori came here, can you speak to that? Also, I'd love you to speak to the haka and also the hongi, the greeting.
Yeah. There is original people from here.
Yeah.
They're called the Mārangaranga, the Hapu Oneone, the original people. But we also come from that genealogy, but we also come from the migrants that settled here on the waka. And really interesting too, traveling towards Indonesia, all around China, all of that part of the world. you can hear the language. There's a
Similarities between
There's
it.
similar language.
Yeah.
And so I met up with a guy, we met up with a guy, Rivi Ali, who went to China back in 1920. And he was a really interesting guy who gave me this pounamu, which they call it J. And then he gave it to me, and it had a spiral design just like ours. And I just sort of said to him, that's from the way pounamu was South Island. And he said, no, you're from here. Yeah. So you kind of discover all those parts. So I think we do come from there. Yeah, we travel around there. We moved from Asia down to the Pacific, and then they made their way out here.
Yeah, but to come here is you have to be strength.
Yeah. And so, and I think for a lot of those people there, because they're connected to this, to the space.
Yeah,
they know the sky. The sea, the water, the current, and all of that, the wind. So they're familiar. So you become in their observation over many hundreds of years. So you come up with this, you don't do this. And so you make those connections with the stars, and how that are an intricate part of, they can take us to these places. So here we are. So we come from that. I come from the Wakamata tour. And so because I'm working on the concept, or we working on the concept that made those connections back to the Pacific, made those connections back to Asia.
Right.
And so we're working, I think there's an opportunity for us there to be engaged and have those kind of connection. And so we are a bit of everything. We are mixed bunch, we are mixed bunch. So I'm not just Tūhoe, but I'm connected to all
everything.
Of this.
Yeah.
I'm connected to all these different, our whakapapa.
The Haka, where we experience, obviously, at the beginnings of our games, all the rest of it, there's an immense amount of pride in this. Would you be able to explain this to people? Because so many people see this online now, and yet there's really this is what this means. I mean, there is, but it's obviously making it more known.
The Haka is just, it's emotion, it's a passion, it's a feeling. I mean, the old man gave us an opportunity either play rugby or go to kapahaka. So I took kapahaka, and my brother Jack took up rugby. And that's the only time you're allowed to leave the cow shed, and he allow you those moments that you can. So I stuck with Haka. And the good thing about the Haka is that because you learn about whakapapa, about the genealogy. It's not just about the Haka, those connections. And so, it's a whole different language altogether. Right. So it gives you more better understanding, who am I? Where am I going to? Where did I come from? And so, and then you start because in the kapahaka will give you a better understanding more than the language that you learn at home.
Yes.
So it's more in depth when you go into the kapahaka. And so I'm still there, still doing that as a performing artist. And and I think that a lot of people internationally resonate to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been working on some Vietnamese people who they call me and go and hang out with them just before COVID.
Yeah.
Down in Queenstown. And so I just told them about the Haka. It's the rhythm, just the mood, the shape, and
facing the opposition, right?
Yeah.
Mostly, is it?
Yeah,
or?
It's just a vibration. You just the move.
Yeah.
It's it's just you don't have to be loud. It doesn't necessarily have to be loud. It's just a movements of, it's like a breathing. You go, so
subtle.
Yeah,
it can be really subtle.
Yeah, and so you teach you to do that, you know, and it's a feeling because it's providing those energies. So the women have a different energy altogether. So the karanga is around, they're the only one that have the voice, that talk to the spirits. They will talk to those who were here, they aren't here, they're talking to the one. So, yeah. So it's a whole different, the language, interesting about our language.
It's amazing when I said, describe the haka, and then your subtlety just with breath, and then the power in that, and when you start breaking it down at face value until you've experienced something, you know nothing about it, because what we see is a very fierce, very strong thing when we see, obviously, at the beginning of the rugby or at the beginning of anything else. But when you...
It's more than that.
It's more than that.
More than that.
Which is what you're...
more than just sort of kind of look at me, you know, like that. But it's really, it's a good exercise, just tone down.
Because that fills up the energy, the spirit state, right?
It's just so chi, like a Tai Chi.
Wow.
Yeah, you know, all of that movement, the legs, the move, you know, and then you become the bird.
Yeah.
You become the little animal, you know, so all of the movements, so all our movement come from there. Come from the birds, the fish, and all of those different elements of the way we navigate ourselves and then the way we breathe.
I was actually in the East Cape, and I went into a kapa haka. They were training at that time for the competition, and just the voice coming from here, the energy, the swaying, like you said, the fierceness, but then there's the subtlety. So as I'm sitting with you, it really shows you such an intricate system that is involved. It's a strength. It's the inner mana, which is what you're talking about.
Yeah. Well,
Strong connection.
And I think making those connections.
Yeah.
Eye
we're
contact.
just all like that. Sorry, I'm talking about myself, but I do yoga and breath work, and yet I can become distangled sometimes.
Yeah.
And yet when you sit opposite someone like you, who's just, has had so much experience through so many different decades of New Zealand, of evolving New Zealand into where it is. It's a very
well, it was pretty hard and pretty harsh. I don't know how I managed to kind of survive, but I made it. You know, I mean, you kind of go through that. You know, I mean, I've been through different. There was a moment there. I was spied at. I had spies, cameras, and microphone in my car, in my house, everywhere. You know, so I had a period of that. I probably wasn't the most watched person during that period of time. You know, they were thinking I'm the Bin Laden of Aotearoa during that period of time. Just crazy stuff. Just crazy, you know, and you know, I kind of scratched my head, where the hell did that come from? Yeah, I have a voice. Yeah, I'm pretty straight up what I say, you know, and that's another conversation altogether. Yeah.
You spent a little bit of time in jail, correct?
Yeah. I got 2.5 years for my last episode, and I shouldn't have been to jail for that.
What was your process in there with being in that space?
Oh, no, interesting. Yeah, you got to make it work for you. You know, you had to, you know, you're intense. You lock up in a place half the size as this room, you know, and then you learn to live in that kind of space, you know, and it was good for me. Time for me to have a rest, you know, have a breathe and deal with it as you go. And because, and it's also sad too. It's sad, not for me, but for so many young people locked up, you know, and the way we human beings deal with our own, you know, not very nice. Not very nice when they, you know, they're just check you out there. They turn you upside down every day just to go out from this room to go to the next place down the road, and so you go through that, but you learn to live with it, so it's become a breathing exercise. You just hold your breath. Then I got myself busy in there. It's just become the kaumātua, the therapist, dealing with trauma, with guys who work and living in there. And,
is that when you came out and started doing the working with?
Oh, no, I was doing that before I went to jail. I did a lot of work about the male violence, family violence. I've seen a lot of that around that, just living in your community, living around the motu, and and I like the job, and just I've become very creative with that, and how to creating different approaches, and how do we deal with issues. People can't talk to each other, and dealing with the trauma in their family, whether it be alcohol or whatever, abusive thing. And so, so I got hired, and I got paid really well. And so also it was good creative for me. And so I spent a lot of time taking people, doing disco, some music, dance, and taking them over to the bush. And 7 days hike.
Wow.
And disappear, sleep underneath the trees, walk in the rain, do all of those things. But that's a whole life story, that one.
Yeah.
But share some of those, knowledge that you can share with the generation that I find that most of the people that come to me, there's nothing wrong with them. In a lot of ways, nothing wrong with them. And people just don't know how to deal with people who are having difficulties about life itself. And we just need a system not made to cater for those kind of people. So it was good for me.
When did you first get your moko?
That's a good one.
Why is this a good one?
Yeah.
It's just so. That's when I was like in 1980, man. I saw your face, and you could. It's almost like you could feel your energy through the TV, and it's intense. It's amazing.
Well, I think we had a discussion, a conversation with ourselves, with some of the guys in the village, and then also doing a lot of research on it. And
how old were you?
My 30s. So there was a moment that we thought, I started talking to some of the older fellas. What do you reckon about Moko? No good. Why not? He said, tapu. So are you saying that Moko is tapu? Don't do that. So are you also saying that our ancient songs is also tapu too? Don't do that. Oh, no. But they're all connected. So having those debate. So we needed to have those sort of types of conversation. I had to try and convince myself and to put myself in the state. I had to find another person that we can talk. So we done this week. I think it took me a period of 7 years to finally get myself, this is what the future going to look like. It looks like this. You're looking at it, and and then we took the challenge, and after getting the moko done, and then I go to places where they got notices around their bars, which I don't drink alcohol at that time, and I go around with some of those bars around Auckland, around the motu. They say those were facial markings not allowed in this place. So I walked in there, and then that's the first sentence. Say, read that. Yeah, I can read that. That this is not facial marking. This is a moko. I don't know how many times I got locked up in.
Because of the moko.
No, well, just having a debate. Because based on their rules and regulations and all that. So we had to battle with that. And so, so now we've got busloads of people. It's just changing the attitude and the behaviour of people. Yeah, we got to change that.
As far as your moko,
Yeah.
how was it over a period of time?
Yeah. When we first started, we had to, because we didn't have any moko artists at that time. Mainly we had artists, tattoo artists. But he happened to be a tūoi, so I had a chat with him. So he kind of said, no. He was a little bit scared. The only time I know about moko was a moko kaua, mainly with the woman, because the village was full of it.
Yeah.
And I always refer, because I went and did some interview back in the 70s, 71, 72, talking about their moko. So I've done a lot of that conversation and how did they get it done, all of that. And so I had to get it through my head and myself.
And each intricate design means something, reflects something of either your ancestry or not.
It's like the bird. You're the bird.
Yeah.
You're looking at the bird.
Yeah.
It comes from Tāne. It's the bird from Tāne. Tāne was the one that created a separation between, between the mum and dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's the bird. And so when you look at that, that's the bird,
But it's wow.
It's like that.
And how long did this?
And then they go.
Is it like kahu?
Yeah. All of that, the birds
All
are
of it.
Tāne, and so.
So the one who sees above,
able to see, to visualise things from a distance,
observation.
Yeah, and observation, and so that's one part of it. Yeah.
It's pretty incredible.
Yeah. And my partner at the time was pretty freaked. She was freaking out of that. You see? Oh. I just smile at her. It's okay. I'm the one wearing it. I'm the one that live with it. Yeah.
Was that back when you were like 30? Was that?
No. Maybe in my late 30s or early 40s. Yeah. And I think we started because we were talking about we didn't have any expert, but
the process,
but the carving, the tohuna that do the carving, they're the one who got the knowledge. Yeah. So I went to see that fella. Yeah. And then we got the artist, the fella there that was a bit scared of doing my moko. He finally said, yep, I'll do it. As long as this fella there, he will be. Yeah. So they started on my nose first, my nose and my forehead. So I walked around like that for about 3 or 4 months. And then I started on, and then I finished on one side. That took about 3 or 4 months. Yeah. But I travelled to Australia with a half face.
Did you?
Yeah. The lady in the taxi picked me up at the airport in Sydney. She looked at me like, incredible.
She said incredible. I love it.
Yeah. Incredible.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, actually, it was really amazing during that period of time for me. And, some of the Pākehā lady with the kids looking at me like this, they said, that's a moko. Yeah. He said, that was really sweet. So, actually, it was all right. Yeah, people all right. It's just a system. Yeah. Go to bars and I did, yeah.
It's just amazing when you hear all the beautiful process that you have gone through and evolved through in different ways, and the wisdom you've come out with, turning prison into where you went and helped.
Yeah.
Inside. And there's something that's just so, because I guess it's just you being you.
Yeah.
And it just, like sitting down at 30 years old going, okay, Moko, how are we going to do this? How am I going to, find the carver? You know what I mean? It's just all this natural, you can't deny the fact of things just happen in the process, how it turns out,
well,
right?
There's a lot of people that have these conversations. So I wasn't alone in those conversations.
No, yeah.
And so But I'm the one that take the next step up.
You're the one who steps up and goes forward.
Step it up and go forward.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to do it.
Is there going to be another one that you're going to do? Step up and go forward or something?
Well, I'm hoping to bring 1 million people on the street. And in response to, and I guess that it's a similar thing that I make a call to people for Waitangi this year. They say, come to Waitangi and have an experience. But it's called the blank canvas. Yeah, it's the white flag. It's the white flag is another flag of surrender. And then let's so we done that. And working together with with our collective, with our team. Yep. And so I'm looking at why don't we get 1 million people together for the day as a response there to show support of unity, whatever that is, however they're going to look like. And so I've been planning that in my head. I've been told to my boys,
that's pretty amazing.
There you go.
Where would you up in Waitangi?
Oh no, the whole country.
The whole country.
Yeah. It's the whole country. It's a solidarity.
It is a solidarity and a unity because, and coming from you, that will be really powerful.
Yeah. We have to find a pathway. We all have to let go of those 150 years. Yeah. 150, whatever that is. I mean, we're going through the process of the Waitangi Tribunal. Part of the process is for us to talk about what happened 150 years ago. Stolen land. Probably even worse than now. Probably even worse than the difference for us that happened 150, 200 years ago. We didn't have TV around there. No. Nobody knew what was happening.
What was happening? We're social media. Everything.
So everything was controlled, dominated, and so it's the same thing. What happened in with the Palestinians? It's the same thing happened to here. So we need to find a pathway. I mean, for me, the settlements is too cheap, and there had to be something better than that. Not just token, here you are. We'll put you in a little corner and we will say, yes, you can build homes over here. It had to be something better than that. That's just my view.
Where do you want the 1 million people to come to?
Well,
or just as a collective, wherever you are.
Wherever. It's really building that right through the nation that we can move people in Aotearoa. If you got 5 million people.
Asking for a fifth, right?
Yeah. See what they can look like.
Yeah.
See it works. And I'm still thinking about how they can work. Who knows? You might be part of it.
Yeah, of course. I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking because I'm all in for like the unity thing, not so much in a kumbaya. I mean, for me, like when I did Tour of Beauty and I went round to some of the ancient cultures, there's wisdom there, there's knowledge there. These are people that have studied and know the land more than anybody else. And but again, this is not my place to talk. It's to listen to you. And that's why. It's residing back into those places.
Well, the whole place has been exploited.
And how do we come together?
We've been exploited. We've been poisoned in every way you can ever think of. I mean, I'm diabetic. I have a disease, but I don't allow that to be slave to it. But I'm managing that. I'm trying to manage that. That part of my health, and finding a better way that I can deal with it. But over the years, I know that everything that we have in this country, rather than globally, is how to make bucks, to make a profit, whether it be through our food. I mean, the things that they do. You go to a shop to buy one of their amazing food, kina. That's the only other food that I do eat is the kina, sea eggs, kina. but you pay $35 to $40 for something is our traditional food. And to me, that's criminal.
Yeah.
You know, they kind of, the way they price it, how do they justify paying $30 to $40 there?
Our health can't be just for wealthy people. You know, when you see organic, like I remember when I was 12, you'd go to the fruit store or sit under a tree and just eat, feijoas or tamarillos or whatever.
We had there everywhere.
Might have hives up to here.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But I mean, it used to cost like nothing.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden now we've got organic this, organic that, and it's priced at a price that, it's expensive.
Sky high.
It's, I hope that changes because, it shouldn't be that much.
Yeah, well, there had to be a bit of system there with what we have. I mean, things are going back to front, for particularly what's happening with the present government we have today. They're doing crazy stuff.
Look, I don't live here full time.
They're doing crazy stuff. So they're just taking the money. So I keep saying to people, well, let us not to be codependent on government funding to do what we need to do. And I'm sure that my language, I learned that from home. I'm sure that we can do things without depending on that. So Māori TV got taken off $20 million, something like that. And but there need to be some response to all of that. So it's really going backwards.
Yeah.
In another way, but at the same time, it's really good to see that they are doing that. So it's really about what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Where we're going to.
You spoke about like the unhappiness in the inside. How do you individually change this within yourself so then you can make really positive, clear decisions on the outside?
Yeah, well, and I am probably more so conscious about what I need to put out there. And that will work. And so rather than blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because all of that becomes noise, doesn't it?
Yeah, it becomes noise. It's more constructive thinking. And where are we going? What are we doing? Is it good? Do we need to be in this place? Maybe, maybe not. We need to think about this. Where is Aotearoa going to? Why are we allowing this country to be dominated by just a handful of people that become a politician for the next 3 years, and then they get voted out and create a chaos? So we need to think more about not depending on the political movements as the end of all things and the beginning of all things. But I think in more getting our community active.
Communities active.
Yeah. And
just in being a community too, being there for each other,
right?
right?
I live in Whakatane, and we're trying to build something that we can, trying to engage through arts, through music, through theatre, in every possible way that we can. And I think we need to start working around those plannings and just locally, what's happening locally.
I just love how you've almost like come this full circle of being really like this incredible passion on the inside when you were younger and like going out there, doing what you need.
Yeah.
But really how you've seen that, which is what you're teaching now, is coming back and really we can only do this together in our communities where it's less of what they would consider radical, but more put that energy into this is what you've learned.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Is that?
No, that's correct.
I mean, look, none of that could be done without where you've ended up, but all that just is a much stronger place as far as, like you said, expressing your art, support your community with sports or speaking Māori.
Don't be scared of it.
No.
Don't be afraid. Always been part of the community. It's just the different narrative.
Make it working.
The different narrative created by the propaganda. and the propaganda tell you another story, you know. I mean, I used to drive a car, you know, every now and then, and on the talkback show, and then people talking about me, and I go, where the hell did they get those stories from? You know, just from the propaganda.
Yeah.
And then the only thing that people know about, oh yeah, we saw Tāme Iti when he put a bullet to a flag, but the flag was my flag.
Yeah.
I pulled the flag from the $2 shop. It's theatre. It's an expression. This is theatre.
But I also love when you, well, I don't know whether I can say that, but when you got the ladder,
Yeah.
eye to eye,
Yeah. Or there was
and your horse blanket,
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because
sending the bill to the...
Yeah, you know, because when you walk into a space and you look at it, wow, look at those fellas sitting up there sky high up on the stage. And everybody had to look up like that. That's not me. You know, it's a moment you're thinking. You know, I'm doing a presentation. And then I asked the fella at the marae, say, have you fellas got a ladder? Oh, yeah. So they didn't ask what the ladder for. Oh, yeah, thank you. So this is it. So I'm performing. I'm creating approach of a presentation. Yeah. And that's what I learned doing guerrilla theatre. It's a moment at a time in the space. And capture that moment. And it's just like that, bang. And Doug Graham, who was the Minister of Treaty Settlement during that period of time, yeah, was really interesting. And
what was his...
I gave him it was a painting, it was a drawing.
On the horse blanket, right?
Yes, I was on the horse blanket. It was an electric blanket, actually.
It was
it was the stinkiest. I actually got the most stinkiest, smelly blankets. I took it off my nephew's horse. He said, give me that. That smelly stink. Yeah, so we wrote. I wasn't the only one that wrote on it, but some of the ladies wrote on it, on the 10 demands that we demanded to the Crown. Yeah. So I presented that to to Doug Graham. Yeah, it became archive, and the Waitangi Tribunal still is today. So he dry cleaned it, and so I sent him my invoice for it. Yes, it's all
and that's
part of the show.
the moment of time that you get to.
Time. Yeah. Yes, just be creative about how you approach these issues that we have in front of us. Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to share?
No, thank you for having me here.
Oh.
Yeah, thank you for having me. But I always remember you. Yeah, I always remember you. And you were the face of Aotearoa during that period of time. And and so I always remember that. But over the years, I read everything about you, your whānau, and all of that. So here we are.
I know.
Yeah.
I honestly, I don't know. There's always been one person I've wanted to meet in the world, and it was you. I'm serious, because I don't know what that connection was. And even with this interview, it's amazing because it's just like you said, it's that moment in time. It was the passion. I saw passion in somebody.
Yeah.
And I feel like no matter where you're from or what you did, it's like you saw someone who was passionate, and that kind of sparks that kind of energy.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for being in part of this space and share some of those thoughts and more to come.
Yeah. Thank you.
Me.
I hope that you really loved that interview. The stories that he had were some of them very tender, some of them very intense, some of them very powerful. Even sitting opposite Tāme Iti, and when he took his hat off and showed me the beautiful Moko and what that represented, obviously the kahu with the eagle. But the most incredible story for me when he told it, and when I actually saw it on YouTube, I think I saw it, was when he was in front of some kind of delegation and they were on a stage, and he said this in there, and he pulled the ladder over. And he got up on that ladder and he said, now we see eye to eye. This is how powerful that is. we must all see eye to eye to be able to get stuff across the line. There has to be an even ground. And I think that's a powerful message for it to go out, is see each other as eye to eye. There's that exchange of understanding and listening and saying how you feel. And what can be resolved in that place. That's what that meant for me. But seeing eye to eye is really, really important in this day and age as we kind of just traverse through some very intrepid waters right now. I feel very, I don't know, I always get very emotional when I think of that. Don't know why. Maybe in the future I'll understand, but I hope you enjoyed that episode. Join me again next week with Human Spirit.